in. So one thing I wanted to share this morning is some feedback that we received from our last year's cohort of members that just exited at the end of August. Some of these are returning members, but we do an exit interview, live, virtual setting, a conversation type style interview with our AmeriCorps members at the end of their term. And we ask them a lot of different questions about their term of service. But one thing that we ask is what actions from your host site could have improved your experience? And so this bulleted list is sort of a summary of the responses we got. And so members said more frequent check-ins. So again, this is feedback from all of our members. So this does not mean all host site supervisors, but these are just good tips that members do like when you check in with them frequently. And like we mentioned earlier, maintaining that consistent schedule of one-on-ones, I think is really helpful for members. They know they have a specific time when they can come to you with questions or concerns. And they appreciate when you stick to that schedule and don't keep canceling those meetings, as tempting as it can be with your busy schedules. Um, they also talked a lot about having structure, clear expectations of what they're supposed to be doing. And we heard a few times that more direction would be helpful. Reliability, support, consistency are all themes that came across in those conversations. A few members talked about they would like to be recognized more. And so make sure you take the time to recognize, thank, and support your member because they are doing amazing things and they like to feel good about their service and know that they're doing having an impact, especially because they're intrinsically motivated by being an AmeriCorps member. They want to feel good about what they're doing. Second to last bullet point, communication. This one should be in bold. Communication, I think, kind of intertwines with all of these, but really important to maintain a solid communication with your AmeriCorps member. You may have different methods for communicating with your member. That doesn't matter, but it's good to have that conversation from the start when you meet with them next week on, expectations of you. For the member and then give them an opportunity to say what they need or what they would like and really try to build that relationship and bond early on so that they have trust and you have trust in them because a lot of issues can be solved with good communication. And then lastly, kind of a theme of today is just AmeriCorps members sometimes say that they're not supported in attending other AmeriCorps trainings. They're too busy at their host site. So that is something to take into consideration that members do like when you allow them the time off to attend any trainings that we host.
Megan, if you just leave it on this slide, because the next slide has more tips, but I'd like to, I don't mean to cut you off if you had more you wanted to
Nope,
say.
you are good to go.
Okay. Um, I just want to take some time though. We have a lot of experience and we have some really super host site supervisors who have hosted members for years. And I'd like the opportunity for them just to come off mute and share like how do you have really positive, successful relationships with your AmeriCorps member? Like what things do you put kind of foremost in mind to make sure that the experience is positive? Because we know as staff that at the end of the term, when they reflect back, the one factor that makes the biggest difference is the relationship with their host site supervisor. If that's positive, that bleeds over into the entire experience. So we want it to be a good experience. So I'm going to just stop talking, come off mute, drop something in the chat if you have something to share. And even those who have never been an AmeriCorps supervisor, you might have supervised. We hope you may have supervisory experience already, and you might have some special sauce you want to share with us as well.
Lynn, your hand's raised. You can go ahead.
Okay, I think one of the things that's really important to me, and I think it's important to our members, is that I want to know what their interests are, what their eventual goals are, and see if we can use their interest and their expertise and their goals as part of the way we structure their tasks so that it's a win-win. It's a win for us because they tell us what their interests and skills and expertise are, and a win-win for them because it builds, they feel like they have something to contribute that's different than my skills or anyone else's skills. I think it gives a better buy-in.
I love that, Lynn. Play to their strengths and give them a feeling that they're not everything is new and that they have something to contribute that's worthwhile to the organization coming in fresh. I love that. And
Yeah,
your
exactly.
members will have goals for their term. So I'm glad
Yeah.
you use those.
I was thinking of one volunteer that's coming in new. I mean, I think of them both because they both have different skills and interests, but one of them works at a grocery store. So I'm thinking, okay, how can we use his expertise in working at a grocery store to help promote healthy food issues? And no other person that we work with has that particular skill. That's just an example.
Yes,
And
letting your
Stacy,
members' voices be heard. Very important. Go ahead, Shelly.
and I'm sure you're following these in the chat. If you haven't, see the chat button and that'll just pop them up on the side of this Teams if Teams is new to you. But Stacy's sharing to encourage creativity, bring fresh ideas. That's wonderful. Leah at Milwaukee Riverkeeper echoes you, Lynn, as far as incorporating their own goals. Make sure that they're accomplished. I know some sites do shadowing and let them take a couple days or a day to do some job shadowing. So that's an excellent way, whatever their goal might be. I can think about a really timid young man that joined AmeriCorps and he wanted to be an attorney. And he knew he needed public speaking experience and it frightened the heck out of him. And so his site did every opportunity where it made sense. It gave him by baby steps to gain confidence in doing more public speaking.
Shelly, this is Sarah from
Mhm.
Marshfield Clinic, so SECHA. So Wisconsin After School Network, we've had a couple members throughout the years. And I think for us now, especially since we're virtual, we just really try to spend time getting to know the member. So outside of the workday and their service as an AmeriCorps member. So, what do they do on the weekends? Just a little bit about them and their life, just because we are virtual. So we try to make that personal connection as well as the professional connection. So again, like what some of the other people had already mentioned, like play to their strengths. But I think that personal connection, getting to know them a little bit outside of, their service is important as well to build that relationship.
Agreed. And it looks like Michelle does that too, taking them out to lunch once a month so they can interact on something outside of their service experience. And I love our Hayward guest, sorry, let them know that they are critical members. They're valued. They're part of the team. That's really important too. Connections with the whole office. Building on strengths. They'll be more engaged when they feel comfortable and they see a purpose to their service. Oh, that's beautiful. Yep, it's very clear to them. Monthly staff meals. Sounds good. Keep them
Cool.
coming.
Hands up. Brianna, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so this will be my first time being overseeing an AmeriCorps member, but I do have supervisory experience. So I work for a service or youth serving organization, and so my background is in youth development and education, and I've worked in very collaborative environments. So one thing I really, I don't look at myself as always an expert. I look at the people that I work with as also being expert in their own capacity. Like I know that I believe our AmeriCorps member, her background's in social work. Well, my background is in education. And so she can provide a different lens that I necessarily wouldn't have depending on her experience and like her educational background. So we can, I believe that it, like we like to say, it takes like a, a village to raise a child. And so we can use our diverse skill set, our experience, and our knowledge within our own lens to be able to better serve and collaborate together in serving youth, or whatever the community is, the population that we're serving. So I look at it as more of a collaborative effort that I can learn from them and they can learn from me as well. So we build in that knowledge and being able to serve whatever population that we are serving within the community.
Awesome. Yep. Differences build strength in a team for sure. I'm glad you recognize that. I like this daily walks to discuss projects. Ooh, I wish we could do that. In our virtual setting, it's hard, but I guess we could all be on our phones, right? Go ahead and,
Do you want to go
oh,
next? You have your hand raised.
I'm sorry, did you say Aaron? I
Aaron?
missed that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's me. Hi. So speaking to the different strengths and personalities and skill level that everybody brings, I think it's important to recognize that and really get to know your member, because some come in with the confidence ready to just take on a new project and start sharing new ideas, and others require a little bit more of a warm-up time. So being able to provide them with smaller tasks and small wins to eventually foster that type of confidence to step in and start something new, I think is really important.
Love
that
that.
sounds like the supervisor that I would want to work with. Ease me in, right?
Shelley, do you want me to move to the next
Yep, let's move.
slide?
Yep, and if something pops in throughout this discussion, feel free to come off mute or throw something in the chat. Oh, I just remembered. But I was a site supervisor for 3 different members, 4 terms. And so I came up, I didn't look at what Megan had the research and any of that. And I'm just like, I just want to see if I fill in any gaps of things that from my experience. Keep these weekly meetings sacred. If you have to miss one, you have to reschedule it. These aren't optional. We're going to ask you on your host site checklist to identify what day and time you're going to set it, and don't schedule over it. Really try to keep it sacred. I suggest you have an agenda. That could be a task your member could be responsible for creating. And weekly is a minimum check-in. You can certainly correspond much more frequently and probably should. We've
Shelley,
talked about goals. Yep.
If I might, too, one of the things that we learned with our first member last year was we needed to sort of redirect fairly significantly early on in the process, with the realization of the sort of comfort zone and personality type that the member had in terms of what our expectations were, what it was that we could assign her, task her with, so to speak, what kind of, and we got some great stuff out of her served time, but it was somewhat different than what we originally had planned.
And without investing time to get to know her, you wouldn't have known that.
Correct.
Yeah, good point. All right, we covered 2. Let's look at 3. Discuss communication styles that each of you have, organizational styles, management styles. And if you find that there are differing expectations of what somebody prefers or is expecting, have some discussion, compromise. This is just a way to avoid conflict before it arises. Be prepared. I know we're all super busy, but flying by your seat of your pants is not going to be super successful because these members are motivated. Most of them are high achievers. They don't have phones ringing. They don't have emails pinging in their inbox steady. They can devour work quickly. And so that means that's on you to be ready for them. And when they finish something and they shoot it to you and they're waiting for your review, they're waiting for your review to be able to take their next step. So that's hard. And it will be a challenge, I know that, but just go in that with every best intention to be prepared and organized and responsive. Appreciation, that was covered as well. I do just want to say though, if at some point, the opposite of appreciation, if at some point you're feeling like this member wasn't the best match for what you need, if you're starting to think there are, you know, issues that we've tried to work on and we're not being successful, you're the day in and day supervisor. We want you to work on conflict there between your member and yourself. But once you start thinking like, that you definitely need to let us know. We don't want to be informed that so-and-so is no longer allowed to come to our host site anymore. And we need to talk about how to remove that member, because we do have a plan and there is a process of how that happens. And we'll cover that in the handbook. AmeriCorps members are going to look to you as like the answer guide when they have questions about AmeriCorps, and absolutely you can refer them to us, but it will be frustrating if over and over again they feel like they know more because they get the same training that you get pretty much. And so just be sure that you know where to access information if you need it. And of course, all of our staff are available to you as well. We've talked about 7 extensively, and I think I have one more. Liberally apply humor, food, and a sense of fun. Just makes the work environment fun. And I see there's some additional ideas. Do look at them in the chat, please.
Yes, a lot of good experience and tips, important to remember. Okay, we are gonna keep moving and shift gears into talking about timesheets.
Yes. So we talked a little bit about timesheets earlier, so I'll talk a little bit more about them. I will eventually share my screen so you can all see what Encore looks like, so you have an idea of what you are doing to when you go to log in for the first time. And then we will share an example of our updated timesheets. So experienced host site supervisors, we did change it up a little bit this year. Hopefully the timesheet is a little more user friendly than it has been in the past. So as we mentioned, timesheets are on Encore. The members are going to submit their timesheets by Wednesday of the following week. So the members are hopefully filling out their timesheets for this first week of service. They have to submit that timesheet by next Wednesday, the 20th. And then you, as the host site supervisor, have to approve that timesheet by Friday. So you will be approving the timesheet by Friday, the 22nd. You can do it a little bit earlier. Like if your member submits their timesheet to you right away on Monday, go ahead and approve it if you have the time. But Friday at the latest. And for the members, it's Wednesday. If you notice that your member is not submitting their timesheets, please have a conversation with them about that. Likewise, we tell the members, hey, if you notice your host site supervisor is getting a little bit behind on approving timesheets, they may give you a little nudge to approve their timesheets as well. So as Megan mentioned earlier, when a member submits a timesheet, you as the host site supervisor will receive an email letting you know that the member submitted the timesheet. So that's when you would log into Encore. and then you will review the timesheet. So some things that you're going to look for, you're going to make sure that everything that the member is writing down, the activities that they're doing, are all allowable, right? So we don't want them to be doing any prohibited activities. You will all take a course in prohibited activities. If you have not done so already, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you will be well versed in what is allowable and what is not allowable per AmeriCorps. So make sure that everything that they're doing is allowable. You're going to want to make sure that they are recording all of their service time, and that you're going to want to make sure that the amount of time that they are spending on different activities is correct. Once you review the timesheet, you have two options. You can approve it or you can reject it. So if you reject it, it's going to kick it back to the member to make whatever edits they need to make. Then they will resubmit it to you. You go through the review process again. Just one note, if you are reviewing a timesheet and you're not sure if an activity is prohibited or not, please let us know. Reach out to us and ask us. We need to make sure that everything the member is doing is allowable. AmeriCorps is a federally funded program. We all have a responsibility to make sure that these funds are being used for allowable activities per AmeriCorps. So we take timesheets very seriously. We do, as program staff, we do try to spot check the timesheets, but we do not have time to go over every single member's timesheet every week. It's just not possible for us. And really, as the host site supervisors, again, going back to being that day-to-day boss, you all know what your member's supposed to be doing. We don't know a lot of those day-to-day activities and tasks. So it really falls on you to take the responsibility of reviewing the timesheets seriously. We do get audited once in a while. Serve Wisconsin, our state commission, will look at timesheets. So it is something that is checked. And then last but not least, please do not let timesheets pile up. Please make sure that you are reviewing and approving them or rejecting them in a timely manner. And with that, I see Megan dropped the Encore website into the chat. So you can all go ahead and click on that if you want to. And I will share my screen just to kind of show you what it looks like. And let me know if you can all see my screen because I cannot see any of you at the moment. Are you all able to see my screen? Okay, perfect. So when you click on the Encore site, this is what you're going to come to. Please bookmark this site. If you just try to search Encore, it's not going to come up. It's a pain to find. So make sure that you're bookmarking this site so that you have it. The default year is our current service year now, so 23-24. So you would just hit submit. Now, when you hit submit, there are a bunch of AmeriCorps programs that come up. So you need to scroll down, find our program, Marshfield Clinic Public Health AmeriCorps Community Corps. Make sure you're not clicking on Recovery Corps because you will not be able to get in that way. So you need to click on Community Corps. And then you are a site supervisor, so that's what you're going to click on. I'm a program director, so that's what I click on. It looks the same though. This is your actual login page. So everybody's login is going to be their last name and first initial. And then the generic password that we set for everybody is password, all lowercase. So you would just enter that in the password and then you can go ahead and change it for host site supervisors, existing host site supervisors. That sounds weird. I shouldn't say existing host site supervisors, previous host site supervisors. Everything should be the same for you. So whatever your password was last service term should have carried over for this service term. And then, yeah, you'll just log in and then yours will likely look, your landing page will likely look a little bit different than mine, but this is where you would go in and then approve the timesheets. And Megan mentioned you can view your members' great stories if you choose to do so. Those are something that we review as well, but sometimes they are pretty heartwarming to read. So feel free to go ahead and do that. But that's really all that you will have to do in Encore is manage those member timesheets. And then if you want to review the great stories, you can. Any questions on Encore?
Anna?
When we first get in there, it shows to add notifications to your home page, select them from the list. Do you recommend a certain notification we should select?
So I'm just going to share my screen so we can all see what Anna is talking about here.
Oh yeah, it's at the top of yours, but.
Yep. So right here is what she's talking about, add notifications. So you'll see my notifications are missing timesheet notification and timesheets with late supervisor approval. So if any notifications pop up, it'll pop up right there. Now, Anna, I don't know as a supervisor, do you have the same drop down that I do?
We have a drop down, but not that many.
Okay. I mean,
Our
if
list
there's
is a lot
anything,
shorter.
yeah, if there's anything that you want to put on your landing page, go right ahead and do it. I don't know what the options are, and Shelly and Megan, I don't know if either of you have ever seen their page to know. Or, I mean, I guess previous host site supervisors, have you
Yeah.
ever selected any sort of notification for your homepage?
I would think that, you know, a late timesheet notification would be helpful to have if you, especially if you have multiple members you're tracking.
Yeah, if there would be the option for that, that would be useful. But I see a couple experienced supervisors have not selected anything, which is fine too. You obviously do not have to.
There's a question in the chat about if you were a AmeriCorps supervisor for a different program, because we are a different program, you'll have to follow the new supervisor steps of last name, first initial, and then generic all lowercase password for password. Of course, you'll get to create a new password once you get logged in, but because we're a different program, the passwords don't transfer over.
Okay, and we have a couple that are having some invalid. So we'll write your names down and then we'll take a look at those maybe during the lunch break and try to get that figured out. Just double check and make sure you're on the Community Corps program and not Recovery Corps, because sometimes we accidentally click on Recovery Corps since the logos are the same. But it's Becky and Mackenzie. Okay. All right. I thought somebody had their
Suzanne?
hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question.
Yeah.
Allison, you probably remember this. Our AmeriCorps member last year, I think in an audit, we discovered that she was completing her timesheets wrong. And I approved them, so I take responsibility for that. I think she wasn't being, if you remember, she wasn't being as detailed as she was supposed to in the descriptions. I just wonder if there's like written guidelines on the proper way to complete timesheets, or if maybe you're going to cover that.
Yes. Yep. We will go over timesheets in a bit. We also go over it with the member. And Suzanne, I think, yeah, there were a few where she wasn't being super descriptive. And then also she was putting her service down under the incorrect category. And we've actually, as I mentioned, revamped the timesheets. So hopefully it's a little easier to use and not as confusing, because we had quite a few categories before and a lot of them just weren't even being used. So hopefully it's a lot easier. But the members were trained on timesheets. I believe it was yesterday. All these days kind of blur together during orientation week, but we've gone through it with them, and then we'll go through it with all of you as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
And we have already made this commitment as staff to do a better job of reviewing those timesheets early on in the service term, to make sure that we catch any, issues or insufficient descriptions right away. We've been if you've been around for a while, our staff is slowly getting bigger because we need the help. It's a big program to manage. There's a lot of behind the scenes work. So we appreciate your flexibility with us too, because we are human, but we've made that commitment to try to keep a better eye on timesheets as well. So let's take a look at what a timesheet looks like.
Yes, so these are, this is our new and improved timesheet. So you'll see that there are 3 categories that members can record time under. The first is fundraising, the second is training, and the third is service. So fundraising, we talked extensively with members about fundraising earlier this week. It should not be a main part of their service. Any fundraising activities that your member is going to do needs to first be approved by staff. There are very strict AmeriCorps guidelines around funding, and so we need to make sure that the funding that the member is doing is an allowable activity. So please run it by us before you have your member do any sort of fundraising. A lot of times it's a conversation between program staff, the host site supervisor, and the member, just so that we're all on the same page and we have all of the details we need to determine if the fundraising activity is allowable or not. So also, fundraising can be no more than 10% of the member's total time that they serve. So again, if they are fundraising, it's a very, very small amount of their service. All right, so the top, you'll see blue and green. So blue training, green service. So you'll also see teleservice in there. Megan is going to speak about teleservice after this slide. There will probably be a few questions about teleservice because this is something new for us and new for AmeriCorps, new for supervisors. So members can either, if they're not fundraising, they are either doing training or they are doing service. Again, we talked with members about this. Training is something that they are doing, like if they're doing their CDC train, which was talked about earlier, right? They're receiving a certificate for something, or there's some sort of speaker coming in and giving a training session. Service is really where most of their activities will fall under and should fall under. So you'll see training and service can be done on site or it can be teleservice. Fundraising cannot be done in a teleservice capacity. So any fundraising needs to be done on site. So that's why there's no teleservice by the fundraising. But if a member is doing anything remotely, they're at home serving or doing some sort of training program, or they're at the coffee shop doing something, it is going to be teleservice and they need to provide documentation. We need some sort of proof that they are doing what they say they are doing. And again, Megan will get into that in a little bit. So that's where the teleservice comes in. But if they are on site doing their service, it would fall under service in the green and then service again toward the bottom. Training, if they're doing some sort of training on site, training in blue and then training on the bottom, and then the middle is that teleservice. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. They'll just stick their hours wherever they need to go, and then you'll see there's a description section. So members will fill out their description. We talk with members about proper ways to fill out description as well. One thing to note is we don't want the members to put their hours within the description just because there could be some discrepancy. So like this particular member wrote 6 hours of service. Well, what if they accidentally hit 7 in the description? Then there's a discrepancy. So it's just easier if they do not put the hours spent in their actual description. Just leave that in those boxes. All right, Lynn had a question. Does time getting to the site count as service? No, so their drive time would not count as service. Exception there would be if they are coming to like one of our training sessions, they can count that as AmeriCorps time. Like if they're coming to the midterm event, for example, they can count that drive time as service. I believe we were going to allow that, correct, Megan and Shelley?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, but if they're just
Another-
coming, oh, go ahead.
I'll say another scenario might be is if you're sending them to like a conference or a training or maybe a different site, that time could be counted, but their typical commute is not allowed to be counted.
Yep. All right. Any other questions on the updated timesheets? Is field work teleservice? So It depends what the field work is. I would say no. Teleservice would be more if they are working from home, right? They're working remotely from home, or they're at the coffee shop. But if they're out in the field doing something that is like applicable to their service, it's in their member service plan, we know that they're going to be out doing something within the community, then no, that's not considered teleservice.
I have some more examples to
Yeah.
share on an upcoming slide.
Yep.
So I'll introduce the new teleservice policy. This is new for all of us. So AmeriCorps issued a federal policy on teleservice. Historically, AmeriCorps had not allowed teleservice at all. AmeriCorps was meant to be boots on the ground at the host site. And then the pandemic happened, and AmeriCorps got pretty flexible and allowed members to teleserve throughout the pandemic. But now they came out with a new policy that has just some additional requirements so that they can verify any teleservice hours. So we have to abide by this new policy. And so it helps to explain the why of why there is this additional work and steps, because we know it will be some extra burden on you as supervisors and the members. But to explain it best is that AmeriCorps uses federal dollars. This is our taxpayer dollars. Therefore, all service must be verified. It's not as easy to verify hours when they are done at home because no one has eyes on the member to see and verify what they are doing. And so additional documentation is required for all teleservice hours, and I'll go more into what that documentation will look like. But just know that this is something that we have to do to abide by the new policy. So what is teleservice? As we've sort of explained, the member is completing service from an electronic device. They're at home, they're not on site. Maybe they're at a coffee shop attending a webinar. That would be considered teleservice. My next slide has all of those examples. But if they're at your site doing a webinar, that is actually regular service because they're on site. So it can get a little bit tricky, but I'll transition to my next slide and we'll go through some of these scenarios. So let's say your member is drafting social media content from a coffee shop. Would that be teleservice or regular service? Feel free to put it in the chat. Yes, that is teleservice. Next one, distributing flyers to local organizations about upcoming event. So they're not at your host site, but they're out in the community handing out flyers. You got it. That is regular service. Tutoring a child in an after-school program. That is regular service. Next example, attending a webinar from home. Teleservice, most common. Oops, helps if I can type. Let's say they're attending a webinar at a host site. I already sort of gave this answer. Regular service. You guys are experts already. And last one, answering emails at their host site. Regular service. Oops. Excellent. So if you have any questions about, is this teleservice, is this not, please reach out. We're happy to help differentiate. Your member also received these same slides, so they are up to speed on what teleservice is as well. So next I'm going to go into some of the parameters of teleservice. This is all in our teleservice policy, but important information to review. So while members are teleserving, they must be available to respond to you as the host site supervisor or host site. What we mean by this is you should be able to get in contact with them if you're working at the same time, just so that you can verify that they are in fact working when they say they are serving. Next point is that fully remote service is not allowable. Members must be on site or out in the community at least once. You can thank us for that definition because we made commuting distance 180 miles round trip. So as long as a member lives in the state, they are within a commuting distance of your host site. And even though fully remote isn't allowable, that would be a case of like someone living in Arizona. We can't allow that. They must be on site at some point throughout their service term. So all of your sites should be able to accomplish that. So some of your members may be working from home quite a bit, and that's okay. There'll just be extra steps required. And so next bullet point, failure to maintain and submit documentation of teleservice hours may result in the denial of hours claimed. So this is not an option. This is something that members will have to do, is submitting documentation. In the case where members are engaging in unauthorized service or they're not documenting their teleservice correctly, those teleservice privileges may be revoked. So just know that this is an important policy that we all have to follow. And then the job of a site supervisor, the member is going to be uploading a document that has all of their screenshots and documentation of all of their teleservice. And then you as a supervisor are going to be comparing that documentation to their timesheet. So if they said they were working on a newsletter for 8 hours, you should be able to see 8 hours of work of documentation on that sheet. I will talk a little bit more about documentation as well as what we're looking for. But my best suggestion, and I gave this to members too, is do your best. We know this is extra work. We don't want members spending a lot of time, putting in their screenshots and doing the documentation, because obviously you as site supervisors, you probably don't even need the documentation. You know what your members are doing, and you are aware of how long about projects should take, but this documentation is especially useful for us as program staff, but then also for our state commission who will be doing audits of teleservice. So from an outsider's perspective, they need to be able to see and verify that service was actually done. So hopefully that helps provide a little bit more of the why that we have to do it. Question from Lynn, great question. Is documentation part of service? Yes. We do realize that this will take additional time, so members can log time documenting teleservice as their service hours. But like I said, we don't want hours and hours of time spent doing this. So we try to make this as easy as possible on everybody. Before we look at some examples of documentation, this is an important form that you all have received already. Hopefully, I sent it out last week, but this is an important document that we will need to collect prior to any members teleserving. It's our teleservice authorization form. This form needs to be filled out between you and your member, and it has to be filled out prior to any teleservice. Now the members, a lot of them have been teleserving this week, technically at orientation, but we've sort of gotten a pass for this week. And that's why we have that deadline at the bottom there of Monday, September 18th, end of day. We know it's a tight turnaround, but it's just what we have to work with. These authorization forms have to be on file before members are logging any teleservice hours. And the questions on that form are on the screen, but we're looking for just more information about the teleservice the member will be doing. How often are you planning on having the member teleserve? How often are you meeting with your member, if that's in person, virtually, and then how communication will happen. So are you going to be communicating via instant messaging during that time? Available by phone or some other sort of method, how you communicate so that you can verify what the member is doing during that time. And then we just are looking for a list of what your member might be doing when they're teleserving. So every site's going to be different. Some sites may not have much teleservice at all. So it may be cases like if the member is sick and needs to work from home for a day, or your site is closed due to weather. Those might be some rare cases that your member would be allowed to work from home, where some other sites, like I mentioned, might have their members serving from home quite a bit. So we just want to know what's allowable for your member in general to do while teleserving. Question from Brittany in the chat. Should this be submitted per member, per supervisor, or per organization? We need this per member. So at the top of the form, there is a spot for member's name, host site, I believe, and then you as the host site supervisor has to sign that form. Another
Lynn has a
question.
hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Lynn.
Okay, I have two questions. We have scheduled a virtual training for Monday morning, but we don't, I have one of the teleservice forms, but not the other one. Is that okay to do if it's in by the end of the day, even though we do virtual training in the morning?
Yes, end of the day would be wonderful.
Okay.
Yes.
And then I made the task list inclusive of both because they're both in communications. But I put it on both forms, and we're going to work out this next week who's doing what and dividing up the task, but I don't know them well enough to do that yet.
Yes,
So
just
all of the possible tasks that I could think of, I put on the list of both of them.
good. Yes, as much information that you know at this point. Obviously, you're not going to be held to this. If you add an activity that wasn't on the list on this form, that's okay. We just are collecting this information right now, so we have a general idea. So we understand that this plan may change totally once your member arrives and you work through their member service plan. Let's see. Oh, Shelley answered the question in the chat. You may be thinking, if you plan on having your member on site all the time, do I need to fill this out? Yes, we want every member and site supervisor to fill out this form just in case. So that way, if your member is sick or your site closed or for some reason your member needs to serve via teleservice, we have this form on file and there's no additional steps needed. Okay, so next.
Oh, there's another
slide.
quick question that came in about where to find the form template, the teleservice form. So it was emailed out. It is also located on the map under the resources section. So you can download it right from the map too.
And I'll send a follow-up email tomorrow and be sure to include it to that email as well. So talking a little bit more about approval of teleservice and what that will look like in the timesheet. So if your member has served any teleservice during a week, supervisor's job is to review that uploaded documentation in Encore to verify the work that was completed in comparison with what was put on their timesheet. So at this point, our suggestion is don't be afraid to ask for more documentation or clarify activities before approving that timesheet. And in a minute, I will show you how to view where the members are going to be uploading their documentation. And to be honest, they could just email you the documentation. You don't need to view it through Encore, but it does have to be uploaded in Encore so that our staff and the state commission can also see it. So here are some examples that we tried our best to provide, because I know that was my question initially when this policy came out, is what sort of documentation are we looking for? So here's sort of a list, but members are going to have to do their best at trying to document their activities because we know they're all doing such different things. But answering emails is an example of an activity that they could be doing from home, but lucky for them, no documentation needed. Preparing for a meeting They could screenshot or add any relevant notes to their documentation form. If they're spending time researching a topic, they can include Google Doc notes or an internet browser history to show their research. If say they're working on an Excel spreadsheet, manipulating some data, they could take a screenshot of that spreadsheet. Any sort of meetings or webinars, screenshot of that meeting invite or agenda will work. Let's say they're working on a brochure or newsletter, social media. Again, browser history, just a sample of that material is what we'd be looking for. And so this doesn't have to be done by the hour or even by the day. So for example, if a member worked on a newsletter all week, at the end of the week, give us a screenshot of that newsletter, and that is verifying the work that they've done for that week. So doesn't have to be super detailed, but we will see how this goes. This will be a learning process for us as well. So the first few weeks, we're going to be taking a very close look at documentation and providing any necessary, corrections or feedback as we work through this new process. One slide that I did not include in here, but I went over with the members is there may be cases that your member is working with patient or protected health information. That is screenshots we definitely don't want it included in their documentation form. And so we have a second section of that form that they're going to be uploading that allows them to write in any hours that contained HIPAA information. And basically, they're stating what the activity was, how many hours, and then you as the supervisor signs off and says, like, yes, just another verification step that documentation's not needed because it contains protected health information. Question from Brianna, do we need documentation for every activity they do or just teleservice? Just teleservice. So the more your members are on site, the more advantageous it is. But like I said, we're trying not to make this too much extra work on the members and appreciate compliance from all members and supervisors. Because the alternative is no teleservice. So this is just something that we'll have to do moving forward. Okay, next slide is how to view teleservice documentation in Encore. So I tried to put a little screenshot here. When you log in, there is a tab, Manage Records, and under that tab is Member Files. In the member files, it's not the best screenshot because we don't have any, we didn't have any members serving yet and no documentation has been uploaded, but I've been told that you should be able to see it here. So on the right side, once you have your member selected, they're not showing up here because there was no member started at this point. But there's a spot where members can upload documents from each week. So each week, the members are instructed to upload a PDF of all their documentation for that relevant week. And you should be able to click on that bubble and open up the documentation to view it. But like I mentioned earlier, if you have another method, like if they just email it to you, that's fine as well to view it that way. Question about phone calls. That would be a good spot and time to utilize that HIPAA portion of the documentation. So if they're making phone calls from home and there's not a better way to take a screenshot of that activity, because obviously we don't want any phone numbers in our documentation. That is protected protected information. And so that would be a good activity to report on that HIPAA form. So members were instructed on how to do that. You as a supervisor just simply have to sign off on it. Let's see, but it must get into OnCourt one way or another. Yes. So the member will be uploading their documentation. That's not a responsibility of you as the supervisor. Your responsibility is only to view the documentation and compare it to their timesheet. So one additional step for you all, if your member has hours via teleservice. I know this is new, so are there any questions, concerns, comments? Can we see the document to PDF? Yes, you can. Let me get that pulled up. I believe I am still logged in because this is sort of a segue into our next little section here, but I'm going to give you a preview of the map, which is the member portal that you all received an email about to create an account. So other than Encore, this is your other portal that you'll want to be able to access. I'm signed in right now. When you sign in, your name should show up and it should say site supervisor or something like that. But this is the home page, and yours may look a little bit different because I have staff have a little bit more access than what you see as site supervisors. Members have different access as well. So it's all customized based on our role. But on the map, once you're logged in, you are considered a member. So site supervisor members, I'm a member, we're all members according to this portal. So once you log in, this resources tab is going to be your friend. And so in here we have the program handbook, member service plan, member service agreement. Here's our teleservice page, timekeeping page, travel, accounts and websites. There's basically everything you need to know is in this resources tab. So I'm going to point out here when we go to resources, policies and procedures. And again, my list is probably longer than yours will look, but I'm going to scroll down to teleservice. And on this page, oh, I have to re-log in, bear with me. It times out after a while. Okay, so I'm on the teleservice page, and so here's the teleservice authorization form. That's due Monday. You can find that here. The teleservice activity tracker, which someone was talking about in the chat that I'm going to click on in a second, is found here. There's a step-by-step guide for members on how to upload that tracker. We have some examples listed on here, and then our teleservice resources. So this is a good page to reference and also for the members. So if I click on the teleservice activity tracker, let's take a look at that. And it's going to pull up in my other screen, so I'll pull it over in just a moment. Okay, so this is what that documentation form is going to look like for members. So the first page, they just have to put their name, their host site, and then they are going to be plopping in any screenshots or documentation into this little spot here. Obviously, it'll expand as they enter in all their necessary screenshots and documentation in this table here that we have organized by date if they need it. And then they can submit it just like this if they don't have any HIPAA hours to report. But if they do, that is part 2 of the form that the member will be filling out. They'll put in the date, the activity, such as making phone calls to community members, Maybe they did that for 4 hours. And then that portion has to be signed by the member and the supervisor. And then a little description of how, you verified that that work was done. A lot of times when people are making calls, sometimes they have record of it in their own system. So you just would put that in there. We keep record on how many outreach or contacts have been made. Any questions on this teleservice activity tracker / documentation form?
It looks like our signatures required on it before they upload it into Encore, right?
Just-
I thought it was not mandatory that they email us the documentation, but it sounds like it is. They email it to us, we sign it, and then they upload it into Encore. Is that correct?
Yes, if they have hours reported in part 2 or the HIPAA privacy concern section, then yes, supervisors need to sign it before
Oh,
they.
it's just for the HIPAA part. Gotcha.
Yes. Yep. So if
Thank
there's
you.
just regular documentation, there's a little note here. If you don't have any HIPAA related teleservice, just save this and upload.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Can you just say again, this was found under the resources section?
Yeah. It's
I
found
just-
under resources, policies and procedures.
Okay, I don't have any of that on my screen.
Okay.
I have just host site, OCA, National Day of Service orientation, and supervision resources is
Okay.
all I show.
So I'll reach out to Sophie. She's our member map portal expert. And so she just needs to change the permissions on it. So
Thank
bear
you.
with us for today. I'll have her adjust those permissions to make sure that you all have access as well. Because there's also a timekeeping tab that you'll want access to as well.
There were a couple more questions in the chat also. Lynn asked if the members are allowed to work on a Saturday. Yes, they are. Their schedule is really up to you and the member. So that's something you guys, or the two of you, will agree upon. So if they are working weekends, it's completely fine with us as long as it's fine with you and the member. And then Holly asked, is the tracker only for when they teleserve or every week? Meaning if they do not work in teleservice for a week, do we need to submit the tracker?
Great question. No, the tracker's only needed when there's hours on their timesheet under the teleservice category. So no teleservice, no tracker, pretty simple. But if there's even 1 hour of teleservice logged on a member's weekly timesheet, we'll need the documentation upload. And Anna, your question, I believe we've already chatted about this situation, or we've at least talked about it or thought through it. But to answer your final question, yes, this is a brand new process for all members. In the past, remote members didn't have to do anything additional, or members that were teleserving, and now these additional steps are required. Angela, your question, no, we received a pass for this week. So no tracker or documentation needed for this week, thankfully. Just starting next week. Okay, I am gonna go back to my presentation. Keep the questions coming. Like I said, this is new and happy to help answer any questions or concerns you have. I am going to keep moving through the slides. Here's a little screenshot of what I just showed you live, but this is the map, our member AmeriCorps portal, I think is what that stands for. But it's a great resources for members. They all got logged into it already. And then you as supervisors have access as well. You should have received an email, I believe like the week of August 18th or something like that. If you haven't got logged in yet or you need help, I can email these instructions out. But there is a way if you can't find that original email on how to get logged in. But essentially, if you can't remember, didn't get the email, you go to mchsamercorps.org, you click on the member home button on the top right, and then there's a little instructions if you're on a mobile device, but essentially you're going to hit reset password, enter your email address. That's essentially your where the new password or reset password is going to be sent to. So you'll enter in your email and then you'll get an email with a link to reset and create your password. So that's sort of the workaround if you didn't receive that email from the 28th. Shelly put that in the chat. Thank you to clarify when that email came out. But then you will, once you've reset your password, you will log in with your new password and your username, like Encore, is your last name, first initial.
If you don't have a password set up, just in case, you might want to just take a pic of the screen so you can, you have a backup plan. And you have Sophie's email address if you need to reach out to her for help. You can drop that in the chat too, I guess.
All right. Any questions? We're sort of wrapping up timesheets and teleservice. Then we have one more slide before we take another short break. Okay.
All right, On3 Learn. So I mentioned earlier that you will all be taking a course in prohibitive activities. So we use On3 Learn. It's an online platform that houses a lot of different AmeriCorps courses. There are courses for host site supervisors, for program staff, for members, a lot of really great information. So all new host site supervisors need to complete the AmeriCorps Prohibited, Unallowable, Allowable Activities for Site Supervisors course. Course takes roughly about an hour. After you take the course, you should feel a lot more confident in what is allowable and what is not allowable for AmeriCorps service. So we are asking all new supervisors to complete that by September 30th and send us the certificate of completion. You can send it to the email address on the slide, our MCHS AmeriCorps inbox. We often refer to this as the shared inbox. Otherwise, you can send it to any of the staff members and we'll get it that way as well. Host site supervisors that have supervised members in the past, if you have already taken this course, you do not need to take it again. But if you have not yet taken the course, you need to do that. And also, I strongly encourage everyone to take the course every year. So even if you are an experienced host site supervisor, feel free to take the course again. It's always good to have a refresher about what is allowable and what is not, especially since you are the ones mainly going in and looking at those timesheets. There are instructions for how to access the course. So the website, I will drop that into the chat. There's your website to go in and create an account. You are then going to find the prohibitive activities for supervisors course. Please make sure that you are going to the supervisor courses and not the member courses or the program staff courses. Make sure it's supervisor courses. There is a checkout code. So WISUBB22 is the code that you will use when you check out. So that way you have access to the course free of charge. Do not use your credit card. We cannot reimburse you if you end up paying for it. So use that code and you will get that course for free. Additionally, if there are other courses that look interesting to you that you want to take, please do it. You can use that code to get those courses for free as well. Any of those other courses that you complete, you don't need to send us the certificate of completion. We just need the certificate of completion for the required prohibitive activities course. There are some more detailed instructions found on the map. So there are actually step-by-step instructions on the map if these instructions aren't quite cutting it for you. Any questions? Oh, go ahead.
I would say when I send a follow-up email, probably sometime tomorrow, I can also include the instructions and deadline, all of that, so you have it.
Yes, excellent. Thank you.
Okay, before we break briefly, are there any questions? Okay, we are more than halfway through. We'll take a just shy of 15-minute break. And when you come back, our members are going to be joining us at 10:45, and we're going to be going over handbook and member service plan. So short break, and we'll see you all back at 10:45.